Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Paul, and
I'm Helena.
yes, and this is a continuation of a chat that we started last week because apparently there are more questions which we will be happy to answer. But I should tell you that we have orcas close by. They're at the top of Blackfish Sound. We're listening to them and recording them, and we may be seeing them, possibly not during the chat, but today, hopefully. They're part of the G-Clan.
It's a really windy day out there today, so it's very dramatic. Humpbacks are breaching, and the orcas are calling in the distance, and so, yeah, it's a very exciting day too.
Yes, it is.
So, welcome.
Welcome. So, fire away. Questions.
Okay, we're just waiting for the questions to be
wait,
loaded.
you have to get on Orca Lab live chat.
Oh,
stream.
okay. Here we go.
No, it's the one up.
Yep.
One up. Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, I think we're ready, and here's the first questions. Do orcas and other whales exercise like we do? Or is the purpose of their movement all based on hunting, food, playing, or mating?
It's a pretty good question, actually. Their lifestyle, I think, obliges them to exercise. So they're not always moving, but they're very commonly moving. And they have a range of things that they do when they're moving.
So they'll be traveling, or when they're socializing, you might see them breaching and tail lobbing and rolling around. But the ocean itself is always in motion, so they're in motion with it.
Of course, sometimes, quite often, they're looking for food, but that's certainly not the only thing that they do. Even when they're resting, as I think we explained last time, they're moving against the current, or they're slowly moving along, making shallow dives. So yes, their life, in a sense, obliges them to move. And that's exercise.
The next question is about your homeland, New Zealand. What are some of the differences between orcas in New Zealand and orcas in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, again, it's an interesting question. The lifestyle of different populations of orcas around the world is quite variable. Probably a lot of it has to do with the kinds of environment that they live in, with the kinds of food that are available to them, and so forth. And what I think we understand about orcas in New Zealand is that they favor hunting stingrays, and this is a commonly available food in New Zealand, and they have a diet, I think. I'm not sure it's entirely based on stingrays, but it's a significant part of their diet.
And of course, here in the Pacific Northwest, the resident fish eaters are going mainly after Chinook and chum salmon. And this is what we're hoping is happening today, that the chum salmon, which is the last salmon species to make its migration through the area, have actually arrived in numbers to entice the orcas back into the area. So fingers crossed, and we hope it works.
Yeah, we certainly do. Although I have to say that I'm not convinced the chum run has seriously started yet. A couple of things about that. One is that we see sea lions that are nearby to us actively chasing chum salmon, so we know some of them are here. And yesterday I observed a set by a seine boat in Robson Bight, which was largely unsuccessful. I think they may have caught a dozen fish, which is a very small haul for them. So yes, I think the chum run is starting, but I don't think it's reached its potential yet. And we're hopeful that it will, and that we'll see many orcas during this next month.
We certainly enjoyed a nice chum last night at dinner.
Yes, we did. Accident for the fish.
Do you include data on the humpbacks in your research?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are always making notes about what humpbacks, who is there, and day by day keeping track of the humpbacks as well. It's become a more important part of our work in recent years, I have to say.
And it's very time consuming because the humpbacks are in Blackney Pass pretty much every day, and there's usually 4, 5, 6, and later in the season even more. And it takes a lot of time to be observing them and waiting for their flukes, because that's the best identifier of them, although we do look at the dorsal fins and compare them on the catalog that was prepared by the Marine Education Research Society, and that's very useful, so that we can look at the pictures that we take and we can compare the dorsal fins and the flukes. And as I said, this is from a sort of daylight to dusk, this is a daily exercise for us.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting because the humpbacks have become such a big presence in this area in recent years after virtually, and I think totally as appropriate, being wiped out in the late 1960s. The humpbacks really have started a comeback, not just here, but on the coast of British Columbia and elsewhere as well. I have to say it's one of the really great stories about whales these days.
A little bit of what makes it easier for us is that we see the same humpbacks come back every year, and some of them are really, really like Blackney Pass where we are, and so humpbacks like Guardian are very familiar to us and easy to pick out.
Yeah. Even I know some of them.
Why are orcas often called whales when they're actually dolphins? Should we call them dolphins?
No, I think I'm going to call them orcas. They are, of course, the largest member of the dolphin family, which is a fairly big part of the broader classification of whales called odontocetes, which are tooth grounds. But I suppose my preference over the years has been to call them orcas and not just big dolphins.
I think the question, though, was should they be called, why are they called whales? Like, we often refer to them as the whales are in, and we mean the orcas. And I think that's part of what the question is.
Yeah, I suppose it's just really a matter of choice. They're all whales and dolphins. They're all cetaceans, and I guess generally you can refer to cetaceans as whales. I don't have a problem with that.
How healthy is the orca population off the BC coast? These are good questions. The northern residents, when we first started, when I first came, were about half the number they are now. And they have grown steadily over, the community has steadily grown over the years to be about 280 plus individuals now. And so the northern residents seem to be doing fine, although in recent years, when they were stressed by perhaps the lack of fish and food for themselves, there was a decline in the numbers, and the growth rate of the entire population dipped a little bit, but generally they're not doing too badly. It's a different story for the southern residents who share the BC coast, and they of course have been struggling quite a bit over the years.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky questions in a way, because if you just look at the simple numbers, you would say, well, they're actually doing quite well. However, there are many issues in the background of those numbers that are concerning. Food supply is a really big one. Quality of the environment, the habitat and the destruction of very important parts of their habitat. For example, the rivers that the salmon rely on, and the kinds of logging practices that have occurred over the years, which are, I think, largely responsible for the problems that many of the problems that salmon face. Noise, ocean noise, is a big deal. We have a very certain knowledge that orcas are acoustic animals, that they rely on sound for many of the most important aspects of their life. And if you increase noise in the water, you interfere with those things. So yes, the numbers look okay, but in the background there are many, many difficulties being faced, and I think they're increasing. And above all of those things, I think you have the overarching problem of ocean warming that's coming as the climate changes, and we don't know what the consequences are going to be in the future, but we are quite certain that there will be big problems coming from ocean warming.
I think it too, if you add in the fact that the community is actually, those are really actually small numbers, less than 300 in a set community, and everything in an orca community happens within its own community, and they don't go outside to breed. So if anything were to impact that community and its ability to survive, I think then you will see problems arise.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if you look at the lives of individual family groups, you see some of what is going on. You see families that come together and grow and seem robust, but then things happen. A mum dies, her adult daughter dies, she's left with only sons, and eventually they die, and that family disappears. And I think you can extend that kind of thinking to the problems faced by the larger community. Things happen, and unfortunate events follow.
There's somebody here who would like to know how many orcas are still in captivity.
Good question. I think the number is about 50. I'm sorry not to have a precise number, but around the world, I think there are about 50. There may be a few more than that, but that's a rough number.
It's a little bit hard to tell too, because recently there have been captures in Russia and orcas taken into captivity there, and it's a little murky as to what has happened to those orcas and where they've been shipped to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct. And also in the background of the situation in captivity is the growth of the captive display industry. I think this is particularly happening in China, but also in other places around the world. There is I don't know whether to call it insatiable, but there is a large demand for orcas by marine entertainment operators. We've been, of course, following what's has happened here in North America for a long time, and I think it's true to say that the public awareness is driving changes in the marine entertainment industry in North America and in Europe as well, and that it is possible to see the end of the keeping of orcas, particularly in captivity in the foreseeable future. But that doesn't deal with the larger background problem, which is that in countries where there is not such great public awareness about the nature of cetaceans and the needs that they have in their normal lives, that the kind of absence of knowledge is really driving the growth of this industry. I would imagine at some point in the future, when people become more knowledgeable about what cetaceans are, the facts, for example, that they're acoustic animals, and that putting them in a concrete tank totally deprives them of one of the most essential aspects of their life. I think when people understand these things, they'll move away from the idea that being entertained by these creatures is just fun. But it may be some time before that happens, sadly.
It is being proposed to retire captive orcas to sea pens in which they could hopefully slowly be reintroduced to the wild. From what I've read, these would have to be returned to the area in which their family pod is located. Has this area been evaluated for such a program, and what would this require?
You want to talk about Orca, or
Well, no, yeah, that's the general idea, that if you take a whale, an orca, who's been in captivity for a very long time, it's quite tricky. They've gotten used to their surroundings, and so the idea with Corky, who's held in San Diego SeaWorld, who's been in captivity since 1969, would be to bring her back to this area, and family is essential. In these orca populations, they are bonded for life, and family is everything. So to give her any sort of chance, she would have to come back to this area and be in a retirement, what we would call a retirement pen, before being either reintroduced or adjusting her life to a sea pen.
Yeah, we have for many years attempted to convince SeaWorld in particular that Corky deserves a chance to experience the ocean again and to meet her family again. We've up to this point failed to convince them, although the fact is that Corky is still alive. She's been in captivity since 1969. She's the longest surviving captive orca in the world. And I have to say, I think despite the conditions that she's been held in all of these years, that she's still strong, and the fact that she has survived for so long is a testament to her strength. I do believe that she could survive the transport that it would be involved in bringing her home. And this is her home. And that she would find a life in a sea pen or in an enclosed space, like Freshwater Bay, which is close to here, where she would feel the ocean currents again, where she would hear the natural sounds of the ocean again, and where she would meet her family again and interact with them. But I think, at least in an initial stage, she would have to be kept captive. I just think she deserves that chance, that she's given so much to SeaWorld and the other people who've been her so-called owners over the years, that she deserves something in return. And what could be more appropriate than giving her a chance to meet her family in the ocean again.
And it's essential that, and I think this question points to that, or suggests that family is critical to the whole exercise.
Yeah, if you think about the experiment that was tried with Keiko, it was I have to say it was a great success, in the sense that Keiko was rehabilitated, recovered his health. He was sent back to Iceland, where he spent a number of years in a pen and being taken out into the ocean, where he had opportunities to meet other orcas. The problem Keiko faced was that he never met his family. There was no background information about exactly who Keiko's family was. And that meant, I think, that he didn't have as good a chance as Corky would have if she came home here. That factor of knowing who the family is, I think, is probably quite critical to the success of returning an orca to the wild. But beyond that, I think you have to think about the other part of the question is what if sanctuaries were created where orcas that were in captivity could find a new life? I think that's another very interesting and big question.
Corky's actually one of the last chances to do this, where the life history of her family is known for over 40 years now. And so we know exactly where she belongs, and that's a great advantage for her.
Yeah, we not today, but this summer, we've seen Corky's brother and sister many times. We know they're great, they're well, and that Corky has a place, and that she could meet up with her family again. She still uses the dialect of the A5 part, so she would totally understand who she was meeting if she had that chance.
How do the resident sea lions, I like that phrase, resident sea lions, know the difference between the resident orcas who won't eat them and the transients who will?
Go ahead.
Well, it's a good question because the transients or the bigs hunt by stealth, and so they don't let the sea lions know their presence if they can help it. And so they really are involved in sneaking up on the sea lions. The resident orcas are really quite chatty, and I think the sea lions understand that aspect of them. And quite often you'll see sea lions actually flanking resident orcas, and they don't look uncomfortable at all, and they don't look disturbed. But when a Biggs is in the area, you often see the sea lions and seals too stretching their necks and listening. So there's other clues that are going on that they pick up on. And of course, a lot of the time, if the Biggs are successful, they will sneak up and the sea lion won't even know until it's part of the hunt.
Yeah, I think often the best defense that sea lions have is in their numbers, and we do see big groups of sea lions thrashing around in the water in the presence of transient Biggs orcas as I'm quite sure a defense against an attack. And what the Biggs, the transient orcas, seem mostly to do is try to cut somebody out or find somebody who's swimming off by themselves, which gives them an opportunity to attack.
We've just been asked to raise the level of the audio, so if we could do that.
All the way up.
Is it all the way up? Then we should talk up a little bit louder then.
A bit closer.
Do you think?
Should we move the camera a bit closer? Maybe. Just give us a second, please.
We're gonna look bigger. Do you still have us both in the frame?
Yeah.
Great. Sorry about that.
Anyway, we will try to speak louder at this.
Just let us know. Do you ever come across orcas or humpbacks seriously injured by the boat traffic? And the question is yes. This summer... The answer is yes. Sorry. This summer, little Fern, who is part of Corky's family, was injured by getting too close to a prop, and I think we talked about this last time, where you could actually see the marks of the prop go across his or her flank and dorsal fin. You can actually see the movement of the prop on there, and for a while it looked really raw. It happened to her uncle, Corky's brother. years ago when he was younger too, and so this is a real concern that these whales are getting sometimes close to boats, or boats getting close to them, and getting injured. And for the humpbacks, quite often there are marks on the humpbacks that indicate that there has been an injury.
There's actually a sign that's posted around here. It says, "See a
one,
blow, go slow," and that's talking specifically about humpback whales, because their surfacings are less predictable, I think, than orcas. If you see a group of orcas traveling along, they're pretty much going in one direction, and their surfacings are probably fairly predictable. But humpbacks, they're out there feeding. They're not apparently paying that much attention to boats.
Or they don't care.
Or they don't care. I'm not sure, but they do surface in unexpected places. So that sign, "See a blow, go slow," is totally appropriate. And speaking personally as a boat operator, if I'm going along and I see humpbacks, I really try to pay attention to what's happening and try to avoid where they are.
One of our favorite humpbacks, or most familiar humpbacks, is called KC. And KC 2 years ago turned up with a mangled dorsal fin, and it's still pretty dramatic to look at. And it was a boat accident.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I have to say that in Fern's case, we're very hopeful that he or she will recover, partly because A60, who is 5, did recover, and the wounds on 5's body actually were more extreme than those on Fern. So we're quite hopeful that there will be a full recovery.
This one says, "I've noticed that we see a lot more whales closer to the banks away from the cams than the banks closer to them. Is there a reason for it?" We're
Yes.
laughing because that is often the experience, that whales it's a big space, and they're using both shores or in the middle of the waterways around here. But so we're trying to film whenever they're around, but quite often they're distant.
Yeah, the cameras have got actually pretty long zoom lens on them, so they're pretty good about getting out there. But obviously they're in fixed locations, and the whales are in quite variable locations. So if we get lucky, we can see them close, but often they're more distant. Sorry about that.
Well, and it just depends on the just what's happening. I mean, it can happen both ways easily. Megan took lots of film this year off of Craycroft Point with the whales coming in fairly close, and so that was exciting. Explore got happening a little bit later than the peak of the season, and so there was actually perhaps less orca activity at that point, but we had groups in here for a couple hours very close to the lab, at least twice in the summer, where there was large groups fairly close in. So you just have to keep watching.
And be a little patient.
And patient. And that's nature. Sometimes it's close, and sometimes it's very far away.
Sometimes it's totally in your face, and sometimes you can barely see it in the distance. Oh, I just saw a beautiful blow out there.
This one's
and a fluke.
Really? This one is about the rubbing beach, Paul. Is it just used by the northern residents, or is it also used by the southern residents and the transients? And this is a easy one to answer. No. The northern residents are the only group of orcas known to do rubbing.
Yeah.
And this area in particular is known for its rubbing beaches. There's a series of beaches within the ecological reserve, and then there's a few rubbing beaches located outside of the reserve that the northern residents come to use. And very often when we see a group of whales, when they're coming into the area and they enter Johnson Strait, they really seem one of their destinations is the rubbing beaches, and southern residents have come through this area, which it doesn't happen very often, but they just bypass the rubbing beaches. And once when we were doing an equipment fix at the rubbing beaches, a group of transients came in close. There was even a sea lion there that went inshore, and they went close to the shore, but there was no rubbing at all. It's just not part of their culture or behaviors.
Exactly.
We've seen both the orcas and humpbacks stay underwater for varying lengths of time. How long can they actually remain underwater?
Well, I don't know if we know exactly in either case, but we commonly see humpbacks staying underwater for 10 minutes. I'm sure they can stay underwater for much longer than that. We sometimes see resident orcas staying underwater that long, but it's uncommon. Their breath cycle is more like 3 minutes would be. It's shorter than that. But big transient orcas tend to take longer dives and be underwater longer. 10 minutes is not at all uncommon for them.
I wanted to know more about orcas and their communication with humans. Is there any evidence that they may be able to detect how we feel or understand?
Well, I suspect they know we want to get closer to them than we should. But so far as their experience of our emotional states, I'd say it's quite unknown. Some people have had the experience of getting close to orcas. I'm one of them, I have to say, many years ago in a captive setting. But my own attitude, I suppose, evolved over the years to the point where I'm emotional when I see them at a distance. Whether or not they're aware of my emotional state, I'd say is quite unknown in most cases.
It's a really difficult question. The whales, when you see them in the wild, they're pretty much focused on their needs and what they and their families and their communities and going about their business. Really, it doesn't mean that they're not without curiosity, and sometimes you will see that they will come and check out an area or a boat and just have a look and whatnot. But unless you're an orca, I don't think they, I think they're
focused on each other. At times they seem curious about people, but whether that extends to curiosity about the emotional state of people, I'd say it's your guess.
Once a calf is born, how long before they begin to eat fish or other items?
About a year, I'd say. They're probably very dependent on their mom's milk for the first year. We were once in fog, actually, at the top of Blackfish Sound in a boat, and a tiny little orca, probably a year old maybe, came very close to the boat, chewing a salmon right in the very front, a little salmon right in the very front part of her or his mouth. So I think around about a year of age, they start switching their diet from milk to solid food.
what conditions and or what time of day is best to watch for orcas? And does stormy weather interfere? No. The orcas live in the ocean under every condition it has to offer, and right now it's incredibly stormy out in Johnson Strait. It's sunny, but the wind is just blowing down Blackfish Sound with huge white caps, and our experience is that it even seems like the orcas enjoy those invigorating days where it's
I think so. I think they enjoy the challenge of the waves and the energy that's in them, and so they have a great time when it's stormy and windy, and of course we love it when it's a sunny day like it is today. Although it often is not a sunny day when the southeast storms are happening, but just the same, I think the orcas enjoy the energy from the ocean.
And that's one of the reasons why we've developed remote systems, both hydrophone and camera systems, is that it still enables us, even if it's not great weather to be out and about, we can still track acoustically, like we're doing right now with the G-clan whales at the top of Blackfish Sound. We can track where they are, and we don't have to worry about what the weather conditions are, or whether it's day or night, which is
day or night's another big part of that.
This gives us a very complete picture of what their day is and where they're headed. Right now, we're trying to sort of just wait them out and see what their next move is. The tide is going against them, so has probably slowed them down quite a bit, and it won't change until later this afternoon.
There may be fish at the top of Blackfish Sound that are interesting as well.
Right.
Let's
They'll
hope so.
stop them in their tracks. Let's see, I have to actually move on here to number 16 question. Orcas are often called killer whales. Is there any truth to this phrase? Do they know the difference between prey and humans?
Well, I suppose the answer to the last one is absolutely. They've never been known to eat a human. The answer to the first part of that question is the name killer whale comes from a Norwegian term which is more whale killer, and it comes from the fact that orcas, the transient bigs type of orcas, are known to kill other whales, including the biggest whales. So I think the name whale killer got translated at a certain point, or transformed at a certain point into killer whale. It's not, my own attitude, I have to say, is it's not a very fair label for a species who is in so many ways benign and non-threatening. Of course, if you're a marine mammal and you encounter a transient, a big orca, intent on attacking you, that might not feel quite so benign. However, the orcas that we are most commonly encountering around here are absolutely non-threatening to marine mammals, and they're non-threatening to humans. So I think labeling them killer whales is rather unfair.
Well, it's a very aggressive term, so it evokes in people a lot of fear, but it also suggests that they're just out there killing all the time. Well, everything needs to kill something in order to live, probably, and whether or not you're an orca that eats fish or whether you eat other marine mammals, you have to eat, and it's just part of being who you are. And we don't label killer lions, we don't call them killer tigers or anything, so it seems like a rather loaded, unfair phrase to use for them. And so Paul chose Orca because it just doesn't carry the baggage that killer whale does, but it's a holdover from another era, and it just is time to move on with this image and allow orcas to be orcas.
I think so. I often have thought that given our own human behavior, if we're going to do that to orcas, we might as well call ourselves killer apes. Yeah. Which of course we would find offensive.
Do you believe whales are as intelligent as humans? This is a good one for you, seeing you studying brains.
Well, I think they have a different kind of intelligence than humans. They've evolved in a very different environment. They have very different needs for life, and they have very different means, for example, of communicating than we do. But to answer the simple question, are they intelligent? Absolutely. Everything we know about them, from the size and complexity of their brain to the way in which they go about their lives, tells us, yes, absolutely, they're intelligent. I consider them aware and sophisticated beings. I don't have any doubts about that at all. And I think we should respect that about them and treat them accordingly.
Is there anything we can do to help whales like Corky in captivity to have a chance to be with family and back in the ocean?
It's a good enough question and very difficult to answer. I certainly think talking to people about Corky and her situation is very helpful. Spreading the word, as it is, about her situation. I think if people in California were to convince the Coastal Commission at the hearings that are coming up soon, that SeaWorld should not be allowed to continue to develop its tanks in ways that are, I think, not going to solve the problems of captivity at all, that would be helpful. I think if a condition of SeaWorld getting a further license to keep orcas in captivity was dependent on returning Corky back to a life in a retirement home in the ocean, that might be helpful. So there are lots of things that can be done. For many years, we've encouraged people, young people particularly, to write or create patches for Corky to extend her banner. And if you look on our website at orcalab.org and look at Corky's story, you'll find examples of this fantastic art that's been created by mostly by young people in more than 20 countries around the world. Which is just a fantastic statement about the way young people feel about captivity, and in particular about Corky. Many things that can be done. An answer, I don't have a clear answer about how to get Corky out of that terrible situation she's been in for so many years. But she's alive, you know, and that also brings with it hope.
Yeah, I think if anybody out there has an idea about how to help Corky or get her message out there, I think we would welcome it. We've been involved in trying to get her out of San Diego and before that in Los Angeles for just so many years now, and yeah, we would welcome any suggestions.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that would really help. If anybody knows the owners of SeaWorld, and their corporate owners,
Blackstone?
and has a Blackstone is the name of the company, and has a close connection with somebody in that company who could actually make a decision, recommend a decision to SeaWorld, that could do it. Many years ago, we attempted to approached the owners of SeaWorld, who at that time were, actually a few times I have to say, at that time were Anheuser-Busch. And we thought we might have a chance, but it wasn't possible at that time. But SeaWorld is facing, I think, great difficulties in terms of the way in which people are viewing captivity, and particularly since the Blackfish film came out, how SeaWorld has been treating its orcas. And I think their reputation could do with some help at this point. And by getting behind the idea that Corky could return to her family, I think this would be of great benefit to SeaWorld's image in the world. But it's not them alone who would make that decision. So if anybody out there is into Blackstone, please pursue them.
We think it would be a great opportunity for them to do some very positive PR in terms of orcas. Since Blackfish came out, the movie, SeaWorld has been on the defensive quite a bit, and this would be a really positive move for them, and they would be essential in order for it to really work. Corky would have to be transported. She would have to stay with people that she was familiar with at first, and it would be an ongoing project, of course. And so, yeah, we need to engage SeaWorld, Blackstone, in the idea that this is a really positive thing for them to do.
Yeah, Corky could not return home without SeaWorld's cooperation, active cooperation and help. You could not just possibly bring her back and isolate her from the people that have cared for her for so many years. They would have to be involved. So SeaWorld would have to be a partner. I think they can benefit. I think if they streamed live what was happening with Corky in her retirement home, and that this could be a wonderful part of what they present to the world. Their fear, of course, is that if they do it for Corky, they're going to have to do it for others, and their tanks might ultimately be empty. And of course, ultimately, that's what they should be.
Do you think there's a difference in the temperament of captive whales if they are transient versus residents? Is Tilikum transient?
No, I don't believe Tilikum was a transient orca.
We don't know.
He was captured in Iceland, but I don't think the exact background knowledge of the orcas that he was in the area that he was taken from would prove one way or the other,
well,
whether he was a resident fish-eating orca or a transient orca.
Right, but both types of orcas probably exist within the Icelandic area. There's probably fish eaters, which they're like keiko, a herring-eating orca, or probably that there are a marine mammal population as well. And the background of all the orcas taken from Iceland during the 1980s, and I think it was the 80s, just the family background wasn't there. The research, there wasn't any research like there is on the Pacific Northwest coast, where these families and these groups have been observed and tracked for decades, and a lot is known about their families. But in Iceland, none of that background, and that was, as Paul said, part of Keiko's problem was because nobody knew where to find his family or whether they still existed or anything, and I think it made it very difficult for Keiko. As far as Tilikum goes, his behavior in captivity may reflect that, but it also may he was caught when he was like 1 year of age.
Very young.
Very young, and he was transported, and he went under a huge amount of stress in the first facility that he was held in Victoria, BC. And he was with 2 other Icelandic females who, from all accounts, never really accepted him. And so he was really just in a very odd situation for a little orca. And to make matters worse, the owners of that facility, which was an open sea pen actually near to Victoria, were very paranoid that somebody would come along and let the orcas go. And so they were held in a shed
In a metal tank.
in a metal tank during the night. And seriously, they didn't even have enough room to move. They were just lined up side by side. And that was their reality during the nighttime. And of course, that is the place where Tilikum did. There was a young woman there who was a trainer named Kelty Byrne, and she fell in the water, and then the orcas there just held her down and killed her, drowned her. And that was again repeated when Tilikum was moved to SeaWorld. So he is a sort of an odd and sad case, really. And whether or not he's reverted to some sort of behavior, I don't think it's known whether or not he...
Yeah. I put a lot of the blame for Tilikum's mental state on the conditions, as Helena was saying, that he was kept at Sealand of the Pacific. I think that he's a sad case, absolutely. I think he could benefit from finding a life in an ocean pen again. I think it's something that's virtually impossible to achieve for him. I think he could potentially benefit from being treated more humanely in captivity, but again, I think it's extremely difficult to find a way out for Tilikum. Taking him back to Iceland and putting him in a location, as happened with Keiko, might be beneficial. Would be hugely costly, and the chances of convincing anybody to do that, to get involved in that kind of project again, are probably very, very slim. Somebody with deep pockets came along, as happened for Keiko, it might be a way out for him, or a development that would be beneficial to him. But he's probably the sad all of the captives.
But it's not the first time that something odd has happened in captivity, too. Orky, who was captured in the Pacific Northwest a year before Corky, when he was moved to SeaWorld, he literally jumped on top of a trainer and almost killed that trainer. If that person had been killed, we would be talking about Orky in the same context. But Orky was a resident fish-eating orca. So captivity is such a distorted place for, well, distorted, it's just a terrible kind of situation that doesn't really reflect, nothing as random as that happens in the wild.
No. It's a perverted environment.
Perverted is a good...
It produces perverted behavior, and I don't suppose we should be surprised about that.
Right, and the reason they haven't gotten rid of Tilikum is that he's really valuable to them. He is a male orca, and he has fathered through artificial means most of the SeaWorld babies.
Yes.
And they don't have a lot of adult male orcas, and so they're keeping Tilikum for that reason, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this really follows just exactly what we've been talking about. Can it be stressful for orcas from varying cultures to share the same space in an aquarium?
For orcas from very different populations, yes, I would think so. Orcas are very, very, so far as we understand, I'm not sure it's entirely consistent around the world, but orcas are very closely bonded to other members of their family group. Their family, I would say, is probably the most important thing to them in their lives. So when you take them away from that family, there's a huge amount of stress associated with that. And then when you put them into the company of other orcas from very, very different backgrounds, I would think there's a lot of stress associated with that too. If you look at the way in which orcas in the wild behave in relation to individuals, groups from other populations, I think you get some kind of clue. They basically keep away from one another. The bigs, the transient orcas, actively avoid coming into contact with the resident, the fish-eating orcas. So I think that gives you some kind of sense that they prefer to be more isolated in their own groups that they're comfortable being in. Even if you look at resident fish-eating orcas, you get the sense that the northern and southern resident communities on this coast really don't have much or anything to do with one another. They have different territories in a way. It's not that they never go into each other's territories, because they do, but they don't make contact with one another so far as one can tell. So I think they're more comfortable being separated and living their own lives. So if you extend that to the thought of what happens in captivity, when you bring individuals from very, very different backgrounds and histories into contact with one another, I think you bring a bunch of stress along with that. It's not to say that they can't work things out, but I don't think it's a comfortable place for them to be.
Yeah, and it really depends too on the individual orcas. I mean, but Megan, who did a live chat earlier, when talking about captivity, actually didn't mention Morgan, who's this little orca that was found near the Netherlands. And she was taken into captivity and then shipped to the Canary Islands, where she's just having a terrible time.
Yeah.
She just has not found a comfortable environment in which to be in, and there was a lot of court cases around Morgan in the hope that she would be like Springer, who is an orphaned orca on this coast, returned back to her native waters once she was rehabilitated and her health was improved. And but unfortunately she was sent off to a captive situation, and once she arrived there, the other orcas basically beat up on her, and she's just had a horrible existence.
Yeah.
And
she's another really sad case, I have to say.
yeah, it's just so a perverted situation when you get into captivity. I like that word.
For Morgan, it may not be over. There's still a chance that a court decision could happen in Spain or in the Netherlands that would give her an opportunity to be rehabilitated and return to a life in the wild. There is enough knowledge about where she probably comes from for such a project to be set up. However, in many ways it's the same thing as so often happens. Once an individual is taken into captivity for the so-called purpose of helping, that's about it. There's so often very, very little opportunity or chance that that individual will actually be returned to the wild, or even an attempt being made to return him or her to the wild.
We're getting close to the hour being up.
Okay.
So I'm going to just read this one question here. What is it like to have the greatest job in the world? I like that question.
It's actually a pretty accurate description. We feel so fortunate, I have to say, in being able to spend our lives here in this fabulous environment, doing this wonderful work, and we are both, I'd say, very, very privileged, blessed, really, to be here.
Yeah, I think we never take it for granted. It's a lot of hard work. There are many hours in the day, and it's a difficult place physically to run. We're basically out in the wild, and we have lots of different kinds of systems that can go wrong all at the same time, and you have to deal with boats and all sorts of other things. But every day we get to look out and we see this incredible ocean, and we get to listen to these incredible sounds, and I think it's rejuvenating every day of our lives, isn't it?
Except when there's only boat noise to listen to.
Ah, well, boat noise. Well, let's not go into boat noise.
Anyway, no, thank you for the question. We are very had this life.
Hasn't it?
For the most part.
So I'm just waiting to see if they want us to continue, or
It's the hour.
the hour has passed.
The hour has passed, so I suppose it's time to wrap this up and just say it's a pleasure to be hanging out with you for this hour.
And stay tuned, because
tuned.
we do have this group of orcas that are trying very hard to come in and stay in the area, and this could be, they might give up, but hopefully they'll keep at it, and hopefully they have found something, a lot of fish or something tasty for them to come in.
And just a final thing, not just to thank you, but to thank Explore for putting all of this together, because what Explorers is enabling us to do is helping a dream come true.
Thank you.